Senator Tillis of North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here and for the preparation. I'm actually very pleased. I thought it was going to be the annual flogging of the GSIBs, but people were asking very serious questions. I'm glad to hear it. I've got a few serious questions for you all. Number one, I want to start by saying that thank goodness you're not the head of an organization that's had an expose on a culture of sexual harassment and workplace hostility, because I guess if you were, every person up here would be asking for your resignation, including me. But we've got a top financial regulator that gets a pass. I don't expect you to respond to that, but it's true. That same financial regulator has implemented an SEC cyber reporting rule that now we have evidence that the ransomware companies are exploiting, right? Okay, this is a mandatory cyber reporting requirement that now a ransomware company has gone on record as reporting. I don't even want y'all to respond to that, but we've got, detailed questions. We're going to ask you what impact this is. A 4-day reporting requirement, a national security waiver that you have to reapply for every 30 days, and it has to be approved by the Attorney General. These people are out of control. We've got to try and repeal this one. I'm actually putting forth my first CRA to try and do that next week. Hopefully, the SEC can see that the bad guys are exploiting a rule, creating a burden for our financial services industry and not producing a good result. That's all on that. I want to go back to the operational risk question. And I think that Senator Rounds did a good job of saying this Basel III endgame is bad. It's not very well thought out, and hopefully it's going to look very differently before it gets promulgated. But who would like to speak for this group around the impact on operational risk just one more time and how we think that they've missed it in terms of the benefit? Mr. Gorman, if you could do it in 30 seconds, I would appreciate it.
It makes no sense. I mean, that's the bottom line. I've been at this for a long time. I served on the New York Fed board for years. I've seen a lot of rules. Some of them make sense, and it's a question of how far you turn the dial. This doesn't make sense. You shouldn't punish institutions for creating fee-based businesses.
Is there any evidence that that work has been done to really understand the fully burdened cost and the impact of this rule on the industry? And more importantly, people like my dad who would get 90-day notes to fund his construction job that I used to work on. Is there anything out there that I've missed in terms of the regulators actually doing an exhaustive study of the impact and the downstream implications? Are you aware of anything that I have just simply not read?
I'm not aware.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Solomon, would you go back to I think you mentioned SFT, security financial transactions. Can you go back and talk a little bit about why people in the pension business should be worried about the promulgation of this rule in about 30 seconds?
Sure. Securities financing transactions are transactions where institutions like ours borrow stock securities from pensions. We pay them cash. They can then invest that cash and earn returns. The capital in Basel III attributed to those transactions goes up by 8 times, would make the transactions uneconomical for businesses like us, so we would exit that business. That would then prevent the pensions from having that ability to increase their returns through that activity.
So anybody who is sitting on top of any sort of pension management should understand that if we implement it in its current form, their returns, at least in this segment, are likely to go down.
They are an end user that would be impacted.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk more about just I want to talk. I actually have to get something off my chest because I've heard more. I'm kind of doing that. Y'all may have noticed, but I understand that you are gaming CCAR. That somehow that you can game stress testing. That's what I'm hearing from regulators. I'm hearing from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. Give me an idea of how you game the system. I actually thought that this is a regimen that's provided by a supervisor or an examiner, and you've got to execute it, and then they have to measure it. Is that how it works? Any of you here want to share with me how you game the system? I used to work at Price Waterhouse. We didn't have a practice on gaming CCAR or stress testing at the time. Have y'all cracked that code? How many of y'all think it's absurd to think that people would actually assert that you could game a stress test? Okay. How many of you think that you're spending more time and money on trying to satisfy stress test requirements at the expense of looking at real risks that are unique to your banking activities?
I'll take this one.
Okay, Jamie.
The CCAR test is 200,000 pages long. Most of us do 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 tests a week. We're quite worried about risk. It's one test. It's to the nth degree. It's a big black box. So we all agree in stress testing, that thing's just out of control.
Yeah, and you know, in closing, look, Silicon Valley was a disaster. It was a fingerprint. It was unique in terms of their activities. It was a failure of supervision, in my opinion. And one thing I hope that we have over the next year is a hearing on everybody who was in the loop, who failed to protect the investors and the depositors at Silicon Valley. Thank you, Mr. Chair.